Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back with another chapter reading of Shattered Dreams. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the like button as we get back into this good book. We are on chapter 12. After a few months at the ranch, I seldom wrote to Mother. She would occasionally write to me, updating me on family milestones, telling me about her work with handicapped kids, and expressing her love. But she rarely asked me any questions. I guess neither of us wanted to get too specific about what befell me in Mexico. It was just about as bad as she predicted, maybe even worse. I thought it would break her heart to know the ins and outs of my circumstances, so I told her very little. For instance, I never mentioned how completely isolated we were from the outside world. We had no reading materials, no newspapers, no radio. Charlotte owned about 10 religious books, but I'd soon read them all many times, cover to cover. When I lived out in the sticks with Mother at Trout Creek, I at least got to listen to the radio, and I was also able to read lots of classical as well as Mother's monthly Reader's Digest. But here, I had none of that. With no friends and no real family besides Verlin, I longed for a few novels or radio to distract me. This is a very isolating experience. Very isolating, because here you go from this situation where you at least have reading material and you can at least escape through that and through listening to a radio from time to time, to now the only thing she has is Charlotte, who she doesn't really get along with. They tolerate one another, and her husband. That's it. And we already see the way that he operates. On Sundays, I got some relief from the intense boredom. We would hitch up the horses to our rugged old wooden wagon, take a pot of cooked beans and a couple of loaves of fresh baked whole wheat bread, and travel 5 miles to a small settlement we called Spencerville because it was owned by the Spencer family. There were usually about 30 of us there, including Florine and Ervil's families. We would gather outside the Spencers' tiny three-room farmhouse for Sunday service. Interesting how Ervil's families are living out loud, but she was expected by Verlin not to, right? The men took turns preaching. Later, we ate lunch. Then some of us would gather around an old-fashioned organ. 70-year-old Lucy, the oldest Spencer daughter, would play it for us as we sang hymns all afternoon. Until we were hoarse. I tried hard to ignore the flirtatious smiles constantly passing between Verlin and Lucy. What? Lucy's 70 and you trying hard not to say that a 70-year-old can't be attractive. I'm just like, what? He's not about to marry her at 70, I don't think. Okay, let me keep going. I had no right to be jealous. Verlin told me all along that Lucy planned on being his third wife. Oh, wait, never mind. Never mind. Let me shut up. Did I read it right? Oh. Y'all. I halfway should start over because Lucy's not 70. She's 17. Oops. I was like 70. Did you know? Okay, 17-year-old Lucy, the oldest Spencer daughter, would play it for us while we sang hymns all afternoon until we were hoarse. I tried hard to ignore the flirtatious smiles constantly passing between Verlin and Lucy. I read that part. I had no right to be jealous. Verlin told me all along that Lucy planned on being the third wife. I forgot that because he wanted to marry her first. And she told him, no, I'm supposed to be your third wife. So he kind of settled and tried to hurry up and get that next wife so now that he could focus on what he wants to focus on. I secretly hoped she changed her mind, but that didn't seem likely. Besides, Verlin needed 3 praying wives to be more worthy of godhood. And according to the principle, I was to minister unto my husband. That meant it was my duty to court Lucy for him. Y'all, this is sick. That's my thought on it. I often murmured under my breath, I'll be damned if I will. The Mormon scriptures say, if any man have a wife, and he teaches unto her the law of my priesthood, polygamy, then shall she believe and administer unto him, or she shall be destroyed. Doctrine of Covenants 132:64. Well, I didn't have to wait for God to destroy me. Jealousy was beating him to it. Since Charlotte and I offered each other very little companionship, and since Florence's wife, Anna, was generally off somewhere with Charlotte, I spent many of my afternoons with my Mexican sister-in-law, Louise and Delphina. Louis, L-U-Z, Louis and Delphina. Louis was Alma's wife. Delphina was Ervil's. Neither of them spoke much English. After being around them for months, I learned to talk better with my hands than with Spanish. I still understood so few words. I became quite discouraged. I would grow weary of trying to communicate with them. Boredom would then force me to visit Verlin's crazy sister, Lucinda. So she has absolutely no outlet, and she's turning to someone who speaks on rare occasion because she's dealing with her own thing, and she's locked away while dealing with it. She may have been out of her mind, but at least I could get her to respond to me in English. I went to see her almost every day, taking her a wildflower or some sort of goodie now and then. For 3 months, I listened to her fragmented prattle, trying to piece together her tragic, unfulfilled life. The terrible despair in her eyes said more than all her jabbering. Lucinda, too, had entered polygamy. She, too, had been a second wife and tried to conduct herself and her marriage as she had been taught by our fundamentalist faith. In the process, something went terribly wrong. I asked God many times why he allowed her to lose her mind when she tried so hard to obey him. I never heard a hint of joy in her words or her voice. No dreams fulfilled, no happiness. She would beat the gnarled, craggy sides of her adobe cell whenever adobe, I always want to say adobe. I always think of the seasoning. Adobe cell. Whenever I asked her probing questions with her youth. Each time I mentioned her husband's first wife, Martha, she would grab a large spoon and begin to dig violently into the hard clay walls, trying to make a hole through which she could escape. I'm wondering if they harmed her in some kind of way, because that's different. Let's see. I fear jealousy did this to her. As time went on, I grew more and more certain of it because I could feel the seeds of craziness in my own mounting jealousy. If I didn't overcome this sin, Satan would destroy me too. From now on, I would have to be nicer to Lucy or risk being damned. Besides, Verlin would love me more if I served him better. And that explains why Mary Brown did what she did. If you watch Sister Wives, that explains why Mary Brown did what she did. Because she felt that if she did this, if she gave Cody what he wanted, that it would allow him to love her more. It makes sense. I used to think that it was like a tactical move, but this is what their religion teaches. So all she was doing was obeying what her faith mandates. Okay, this is making me look at things differently. I can appreciate this book. The longer Verlin and I managed to try to stay pure, the more I longed to be held and loved physically. He insisted he loved me, but his words didn't match up with his actions in any manner that made sense to me emotionally, because I don't think he does. I think it's like Cody. I think it's like a lot of these men, where you say what you're supposed to say because you're supposed to have love for your wife, apparently. There's a difference between loving someone and being in love with someone. Every other night, after he started his soft snoring next to me, I'd cry myself to sleep. I pled with him to change his strict rule about sex. My mind consented to the doctrine, even agreed with it, but my body kept demanding to be touched. I was a tortured example of the old Bible dictum we've all heard 100 times about willing a spirit plagued by weak flesh. As long as Verlin remained aloof to it, my weak flesh threatened to destroy me. That's not you being weak. That's you wanting your husband. In an effort to bring him over to my way of thinking, I tossed out all the significant Mormon scriptures I could think of. For example, men are that they might have joy. Surely women are that they might have joy too, I argued. Sex would give me joy. Irene, Verlin answered sternly, sex is not to be used for pleasure, only for procreation. You know that. If we allow ourselves to enjoy the sex act, God will punish us for all the sins of the flesh. You expect me to believe that when he's having sex, he's not enjoying it? I don't know how to tell you this, Verlin, but if you're climaxing, at some point you enjoyed something. So don't sit there and act like she's the only one here that is committing a sin. This is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I fought with him almost every time he came to my room, but he continued rejecting my loving advances. Sex once a month is sufficient for anyone, he reminded me, determined to drive his point home. So you having sex once a month, and when you're having sex, you don't even know if she's ovulating or not. So that doesn't make sense. And you telling me you only do it once a month with Charlotte? I doubt it. One night I was particularly determined to have my way. I thought God was no respecter person, I challenged him. Isn't he? Then why is he spoiling you? You're the one who seems to be having all the fun. You know I didn't make the rules. Besides, I'm just doing it for duty's sake. I was so frustrated I couldn't speak. Girl, I need her to stop begging for this, though. I get it. I understand it. She has a desire to be loved by her husband. My pride wouldn't let me beg for it like that. I beat my fist into my pillow and then used it to smother my sobs so Charlotte wouldn't hear them. I couldn't even scream when I wanted to. Of course, he didn't understand my new urgency. How could he? I only known for about a week that I was pregnant, and the law of purity completely forbade sex during pregnancy. The longer I kept enjoying our monthly procreation without telling Verlin that I was pregnant already, the more obvious it would eventually be to him that I violated the law of purity with knowing intent. I felt I had to tell him about the baby the next day, so tonight would be my last chance to experience a truly passionate love. After that, nothing for 9 endless months, plus however long I nursed. Wait, so they can't have sex while she's nursing? I'm gonna shut up. Harsh as it was, that was the rule. I often likened it to a person who goes her life without sweets. Then one day she gets invited to a birthday party where she's given a giant slice of a delicious, moist chocolate frosted cake. After 2 fabulous bites, someone yanks it right out of her mouth and tells her to stop. Stop. Turn off your taste buds. Well, my taste buds just wouldn't turn off. As I continued to sob in my pillow, Verlin pulled me close and whispered, just say your prayers more often, Irene. God will help you overcome this. Louis and Delphina's suspicions of me grew even faster than my expanding stomach. Why, even my swollen breast revealed more to them than Verlin had. Tongues wagged. There were vile insinuations of adultery, which of course was a sin far worse than polygamy, even to these Catholic girls. Verlin was about to be scandalized, especially among his own people, so he finally had to tell them everything. Always one to put off conflict, he intended to confess his polygamy when the time was just right, but my stomach beat him to it. The truth simply popped out, quite literally. My pregnancy caused great consternation. Am I saying that right? Consternation within the family. Once their suspicions were confirmed, Louis and Delphine fought their husbands bitterly. They warned Alma and Ervil not to dare follow in Verlin's polygamous footsteps. So when they say families, I guess Ervil didn't. I'm all over the place with this. I guess they didn't have polygamous families yet. Or they may have and they didn't know. I don't know. We'll see. Products of plural marriage themselves, the LeBaron brothers all believed in polygamy. In fact, their fundamentalism led them to seek religious refuge in Mexico. But Verlin was the first of them to actually practice the principle. Until now, they all been busy homesteading their forsaken outposts, establishing their family kingdom in the wilderness, their version of the United Order. Like the prophets of old, plural marriage was a vital component of their plan, but it was a component not yet implemented. An unspoken competition raged between the brothers over who would succeed at it first. Although the youngest, Verlin had been best positioned to circulate socially while he attended BYU. He worked through the polygamous families network in Utah to find his second celestial bride, me. As it turned out, then by my becoming Verlin's second wife really was a huge deal. Our marriage not only launched Verlin into the principle, it launched the entire LeBaron clan into the practice. This won me an animosity from everyone. While Verlin's older brothers wanted to see the family live a higher law of celestial marriage, Alma, Ervil, and Florin preferred to get there before Verlin. They resented me for giving Verlin an edge over them, and their wives resented me for bringing home the dreaded reality of polygamy, an offense to their morality and religious scruples, but even more so to their womanhood. So the woman always, as usual, gets blamed for everything. And forget that Verlin sought her out. Forget that Verlin brought them. Forget all of this other stuff. I thought that the people were already polygamous. They're not polygamous because they're not married. They just want to be polygamous. They want to be polygamous, even though their wives don't want it and they're Catholic girls that want no part of it. This is ridiculous. It's not her fault. Even after my status as Verlin's wife was discovered, the brothers' wives still fully accepted Charlotte into their circle, continuing to treat her like a sister-in-law, but they completely shunned me. Now I truly was a stranger in a strange land. Soon I'd outgrown all my clothes. Nothing would fit. Verlin somehow managed to buy me 3 pieces of material in El Valle, and Charlotte helped me to cut out and sew up 2 maternity outfits. I like my navy blue skirt with the tiny pink flower smock best. I saved it to wear to Spencerville on Sundays. I wore a pair of Verlin's white knit shorts in place of my shrinking panties. As my stomach expanded, I found them with their fly opening so much more comfortable. I promised him that I stopped wearing them as soon as he brought me something bigger of my own. Verlin talked to Lucy's mother, Sylvia Spencer, and she came to my rescue. She led me into her own cluttered bedroom, where she stacked several boxes of used clothing she was saving for her 12 children to use. I had to try hard not to look too ungrateful when she handed me a big pink pair of silky old-fashioned bloomers. I was only 17. I deserved better than that, but I knew pride groweth before fall. So I swallowed my pride. The ugly bloomers would stretch nicely as my tummy grew. Besides, they'd be a perfect match for my homemade flour sack, half slip, and the even stranger looking bra I made from a sugar sack. Wow. After all these years and the work and the miles in between, here I was wearing flour sack clothes again. I clopped around in torn, worn out shoes I left behind when I walked too fast. I was supposed to be thankful for these too. A store in Nuevo Casas Grandes sold Alma a whole load of outdated shoes for next to nothing. He meant to supply all of us and then make a profit selling the leftovers to poor Mexicans up in the mountains. When I saw the weird assortment, I laughed and told Verlin I wouldn't want the whole load, even if you gave them to me. They look like shoes my grandma used to wear. I refuse to be seen in them. Irene, I get you, girl. I understand that you're young, but girl, you just say you keep walking out of your shoes. Put something on those feet. Irene, be grateful, he insisted. These are a blessing to us. No one will see them on you except our family. The other ladies are already wearing them, so don't be ridiculous. It was bad enough being pregnant, let alone barefoot, so I reluctantly accepted them. One afternoon, when I was 4 months pregnant, Verlin crept up behind me and pulled my body close to his. He kissed the sides of my face, and he positioned his hands on my bulging tummy. Is the baby kicking? He asked excitedly. Tell me when it does. I want to feel it. My response came as complete shock to both of us. What? This baby will die when it's born. What? When I heard those words tumble out of my mouth, I was angry with myself for having said them. Maybe sometimes you know. But a strange knowing went through me, and I could not deny it. Verlin pulled me even tighter, and I realized he was crying. Never had I seen him shed a single tear. I felt terrible. I never wanted to hurt anyone again, much less him. He sobbed, gasped several times, and said, Don't you ever say such an awful thing. When I felt his sorrow, I closed my mind to the awful premonition and promised never to mention it again. Oh, boy. My navy maternity skirt wasn't exactly dirty, but I decided to wash it along with the matching smock with the dainty flowers on it. As I soaked the top, gently squeezing it, all the tiny flowers faded and then dissolved completely in the water. I was dismayed. My pretty smock was now a dingy gray. I had to rub around the collar and beneath the sleeves to remove the few forlorn little flowers that remained. Then, as soon as the dark blue skirt hit the water turned into ink. I rinsed it quickly in clear water and wrung it out, but my heart grew sick when I flattened the skirt to hang it on the rope clothesline. It was streaked with dingy blue and gray lines, like someone had poorly tie-dyed it. My new outfit was ruined. The only other dress I could fit in looked even worse, since I'd worn it every day, herding cows, making cheese, baking bread, and canning fruit. Now, my nice Sunday skirt and smock looked nearly as bad. My first trip to the doctor was to be the following day, and I had nothing to wear. Verlin insisted that I iron my ruined skirt and smock. When Charlotte saw me, she offered to let me find something of hers to wear, but I gained so much weight that nothing she had would fit me. The skirt and smock would have to do. This was going to be my first trip to the city since arriving in Mexico. Nueva Casas Grandes, or Casas as we called it, was only 40 miles away, but I had never been there. Alma offered us a ride over so we could save the bus fare, but we'd have to hitchhike home because he'd be gone on to the mountains to sell his hoard shoes. As I prepared to leave for town, my dignity was still very much in question. I knew I had to have a medical checkup in order to see that the baby was in the proper position. And I meant to go to the doctor looking nice in my new outfit rather than looking like a poor pregnant peasant. Yet, here I was in ruined clothes and old ugly grandma shoes. I wiped I wiped the caked mud off of them, hoping I would remember not to cross my legs and reveal the big holes in the soles. I put pieces of cardboard inside them so the rocks wouldn't bruise my feet. So wait a second. She's wearing the new shoes and the new shoes already have holes? I'm confused. I never been to a doctor before. One reason was I'd always been healthy. Besides that, pigs didn't go to doctors unless something was serious. I had no idea what I was in for. I thank God the doctor would be Mexican so I wouldn't be able to understand him. While he examined me, he could talk to Verlin, and that might keep his attention off of me just a little. What if I don't go, Verlin? I asked in desperate attempt to get out of it. You have to go. We're having the baby at home, remember? Aunt Sylvia said she'd deliver it only on the condition that it's down in the right position, so it will be born head first. She already lost one that came breech. She doesn't want to take any chances. I'll die if I have to go there looking like this. Well, the baby may die if you don't, he countered angrily. Verlin almost dragged me into the Dodge pickup where he sat by Alma and I sat by the window. Frightening mental images fluttered through my mind. I'd heard, for example, that doctors in the States could actually look at you, well, you know, horrors. I hoped these Mexican doctors were different. Oh, she's talking about having a vaginal exam. Oh, yeah, it's not the greatest, but I get it. Horrors. I hope these Mexican doctors were different. If he felt my tummy and that was all, I could stand that. But I thought I'd die if he saw my homemade underclothes. The red and blue letters flower hadn't completely washed out of my half slip because we couldn't afford bleach. My mind raced ahead almost as fast as the truck. Would the doctor see I had a homemade bra too? I couldn't interrupt Verlin with my silly fears. If I did, Alma would hear. So I turned to God. Whatever you do, God, please don't let this foreigner see these old-fashioned, hand-me-down pink bloomers. It took forever for us to get on that old bumpy dirt road, Finally, in the distance, I saw the big city of Casas. Boy, did these LeBarons stretch things. It wasn't a city. It was more like one of the small western towns I'd seen in the movies. There was a railroad and a railroad station, the Hotel California, a little church, the bank, and a dry goods store called El Madrigo de la Luis. Okay. I saw improvised stalls where Mexican vendors were selling straw hats, leather belts, and fruit. A few other old-fashioned buildings lined the sides of the main road, and a splattering of houses completed the town. That was it. Alma let us out at the town park. Verlin held my hand as we crossed the narrow street. Then he showed me the stairs at the back of the bank that led up to the doctor's office. I want you to go up alone, he said. What? This is Dr. Hatch's office. He's a Mormon, and he's the finest doctor in town. Even better, he speaks English. I'm sending you to him because you deserve the best. I was appalled. I'm not going up there without you, I protested. Certainly not looking like this. Well, you got to probably go up there without him because isn't Charlotte pregnant too? Or did she already have the baby? Because we haven't heard anything else about that second baby, but he probably doesn't want to be seen with you. Verlin merely folded 20 pesos into my hand and gently pushed me onto the first step. Go, Irene. Go on up. I stood there, speechless. Then I collected my thoughts for one last-ditch effort to escape my fate. Your family only found out about me 3 months ago, I said. Are you now prepared to tell the Mormons? Heavens no, he exclaimed excitedly. Don't you dare tell him who you're married to. I'll be excommunicated from the Mormon church if you do. Contrary to my experience as a child in Utah, he grew up within the LDS church in Mexico, and he still had many Mormon friends. In his usual fashion, he wanted me to delay as long as possible their discovering that he had chosen to live according to his fundamentalist heritage and training. What will I tell him? Just go up there and say, you're Irene Kunz. Make sure you do not mention me. Seeing I wasn't going to get out of this, I took a long, deep breath, sent one last silent prayer up to God, and climbed the stairs, trembling and alone. Dr. Hatch was a pleasant, ruddy-faced man of about 35. He offered me a chair, and I sat down in front of his desk. Thanking God, this put my skirt and shoes out of his line of vision. You're new around here, aren't you? He asked me as he took a new file out of his bottom desk drawer. Before I could answer, he continued, Well, we'll just get a little information on you first. Your name, Irene Kunz. I answered quickly, hoping he wouldn't probe that much further. He wrote it down, paused, and looked me straight in the eye. It's LeBaron, isn't it? I froze. Verlin's own family had barely found out. How could word have traveled so fast? He interrupted my thoughts. It is LeBaron, isn't it? Yes, I admitted, but I don't go by that name. Now that we've cleared that up, the doctor said, what can I do for you? I want to make sure that my baby is in the right position because I want to have it at home. How far along are you, he asked. I kept my eyes on the floor. A little over 7 months, I think. Well, just slip off your bloomers and lie down on the table. Heavens, did he have x-ray vision? But then he added, oh, I guess they don't call them bloomers anymore. They're called panties, aren't they? He turned his back to give me a few moments of privacy. I had to pull the faded, tight-fitting skirt over my hips and swollen belly to remove He'd been exactly right. Bloomers. I quickly folded them and hid them under the wooden chair. I eased up onto the table, covering myself up with the sheet he'd given me. Are you ready? He asked. I knew I'd never be ready, so I lied. I guess so, I said. Dr. Hatch turned around and walked toward me with a rubber glove on his right hand. With his free hand, he pulled up some metal stirrups from the sides of the table, guiding each of my shoes onto one of them. Slide your buttocks down at the end of the table, he commanded. I was dying 1,000 deaths. He could see not only my flour sack slip and my raggedy soles, but my whole rear end as well. I turned scarlet. Why even Verlin hadn't seen this much of me, let alone some stranger. Verlin hadn't seen that much of her. Did she wear something too? The kindly doctor tried to ease my nerves. Don't be so embarrassed, he said. I have so many people coming here. I don't even notice whether they're men or women. But I didn't believe him. His gloved hand suddenly probed painfully deep inside of me as he explored, moving his fingers here and there. I grew increasingly mortified. I wondered if this was somehow violating God's sexual code. Removing his hand from me and the glove from his hand, he said, the baby is in perfect position. After that, he walked over to the window and peered down on the park below. Take your time getting dressed, young lady. I'll give you a minute. It took me only a few seconds. I'm dressed, I said, still embarrassed. Oh, there's one more thing. Sit back up here on the table. I need to check something else before you go. He instructed me to undo the 2 top buttons of my faded smock. Oh, no, you don't, I wanted to say. I held the smock tightly to my throat. It's okay, he said patiently. I just want to see how your nipples are. You do plan on breastfeeding, don't you? I never got my nipples checked out by the doctor. I got them checked out by the lactation nurse, but I didn't get them checked by the doctor. Not saying that he's doing anything wrong. I'm just saying, yeah. Continuing to guard my breast with a trembling hand, I insisted my nipples were okay. He gently but firmly moved my hand and unbuttoned the blouse himself. Why is he unbuttoning her blouse? I fought back tears as he pulled my large swollen breast from the homemade bra. Now he's seen it all. My ordeal was finally over. How much do I owe you? I asked a bit steadier now that my pathetic underclothes were finally back under my other said garments. Usually I charge 10 pesos, that's 80 cents, but I see you need it worse than I do, so this time it's on me. Not to say it like that. He was being nice there, but did he have to say that? I see you need it more than me, so just keep it. Wow, if only examinations were that cheap, right? One final humiliation. Thanks, I muttered, bolting out the door as tears began streaming down my red cheeks. I was going so fast and was so blinded by my misery, I came close to stumbling on the flight of stairs. Verlin was waiting for me nervously, always sensitive to the plight of others. He grabbed me when he saw my tears and said, "Don't cry right here, Irene. All these people are looking. They'll wonder what I've done to you. Please," he begged. You're not even taking into consideration how she feels. You're saying don't cry right here. They're going to wonder what I did to you. Maybe they're going to wonder what her experience was like with the doctor. They're not thinking about you, despite what a lot of you men seem to believe in this religion, which is all about you. Well, get me out of here, I sobbed. We walked side by side for about half a block and entered a small restaurant, taking a seat at the table in the back away from the other customers. Then he said to me, "Irene, please, don't take this so hard. Let's get happy. I'll buy you anything you want." I hadn't tasted meat for 10 months, so I said, "I want a big, thick, juicy steak." Suddenly, I was famished. He rattled off something in Spanish to the waitress. I understood none of it except her response, and that was easy because she simply shook her head and said no. Verlin laughed. "I guess it's just not your day. They don't have steak." He ordered his favorite dish for the both of us, cheese enchiladas. He didn't have to ask what soda I preferred since I'd been begging for it for almost a year. The waitress returned with 2 ice-cold Cokes. We ate our enchiladas leisurely. I savored each bite, finding the fried egg on top a special treat. We held hands across the table while Verlin knocked my ugly shoes playfully with his worn-out ones and said, "I'm sorry for what happened at the doctor's office and that you didn't have anything nice to wear. I'm sure Dr. Hatch didn't mean to embarrass you. You are so beautiful to me. I love you even if you wore a gunny sack. My condition made him more sensitive. I was so starved for his love that this sweetness went straight to my heart. Maybe God did have a better future plan for his faithful servants after all. I resolved to go home and try harder to be happy. God loves you, Irene. The worst is over, Verlin said tenderly. How I hoped it was true. After lunch, we sat in the pleasant little park, watching people and eating popsicles in the shade. Verlin didn't rush me because this was my trip to the city. Eventually, we had to think about hitchhiking back home. It was too far for me to walk to the edge of town where the main road came through, so Verlin woke up the town's only cab driver to take us that far in his dilapidated vehicle. Then we waited for an hour in the broiling sun until a large blue truck stopped for us. It was loaded up to the top of the side racks with hundreds of cases of soda pop. Verlin asked if we could have a ride. The driver and his assistant smiled and nodded their heads. Verlin told me to get up front, and he climbed on top of the cargo sitting near the cab. I felt uneasy riding between the 2 young Mexicans, not knowing what they were saying to each other. As the truck bounced over the dirt road, the tires fell into every rut, sending us swaying and jerking so much I was afraid we'd tip over. The heat was stifling, and I could barely breathe through all the dust. Before long, I was feeling terrible. I held my aching stomach and wondered if my pains might be premature labor, but they grew more intense as we jolted back and forth. Both men watched helplessly as I clung to my rumbling, swollen belly, the pains growing worse and worse. I desperately needed out of the truck, but I couldn't make them understand it wasn't labor I was groaning about. I was having an attack of diarrhea. The enchiladas. My God, I said to no one in particular, I've got Montezuma's revenge. Grabbing my stomach even harder, I cried out loudly and prayed for them to stop. I couldn't remember the Spanish word for stop, but I knew I had to run for a bush. I scanned the road desperately, hoping that over the next knoll there'd be a tall mesquite bush behind which I could relieve myself. I took deep breaths, but one more bump and the inevitable would happen. We topped the next summit. To my horror, it fell away into a pretty green valley full of Mexican workers busily digging trenches on each side of the road. There was not a bush in sight. My sobs so frightened the driver, he stopped the truck right there. I leapt out, sobbing in agony, as everyone watched me wobble to the back of the truck. Verlin jumped down from his perch, exclaiming, "What's the matter, honey?" "I've got diarrhea," I've cried. "I gotta go. I gotta go. Verlin, I can't wait." He glanced around. By this time, all the workers were leaning casually against their pickups and shovels, not 20 feet away, watching the show. With complete disgust, he said, "Go then, just go." I had no choice. I tugged my tight blue skirt over my waist, pulled down my pink bloomers, and let loose. What? Right there? My revenge took off in every direction. The spectators whooped and hollered, waving their straw hats wildly. Even the driver came around to the truck's rear end and saw mine. Verlin was mortified. He usually never swore, but he couldn't help himself. "Damn it, Irene, get back in the truck. Let's get out of here." "I can't get back in there with those men. Please, Verlin," I begged. "Damn it, get back in," he ordered. "It'll kill me if I do," I pled. He gritted his teeth and laughed, humiliated. "Irene, I'll kill you if you don't." I reluctantly obeyed. Did she even wipe her butt? Sorry. Sitting next to the window, I covered my face with my hands and cried all the way home. Soon, after my traumatic checkup in Casas, Verlin received a summons to appear before the LDS Church Court in Colonia, Dublin, to be tried for his membership. Yeah, they already knew soon as she came. The Mormon Church in Mexico was as intolerant of plural marriage as the Mormon Church in the States. Dr. Hatch had confirmed to the church that Verlin was practicing polygamy, and at his trial, they excommunicated him. He said he didn't blame me for it, but I felt as if I'd triggered the events costing him his membership. They already knew about you, girl. Afterward, Verlin told us he made a heroic effort to defend plural marriage. He reportedly told the LDS High Councilman that it was the Mormon Church that should be on trial for abandoning polygamy, rather than him being on trial for practicing it. Verlin's answers to one particular question from them finally clinched a verdict against him. "Are the two ladies who were carrying your babies when Dr. Hatch examined them both your wives?" "I'll tell you one thing for sure," Verlin said. "No lady ever carried my baby who wasn't my wife." The truth was painfully out. Poor Verlin knew that sooner or later this would happen, but he was still perturbed when it did. He gained a second wife and entrance to the principal, but he lost the mother church, though which God originally commanded Mormons to live polygamy. He believed the Mormon God was unchangeable. So why didn't the LDS leaders still proclaim and obey God's laws? Brigham Young condemned anyone who wouldn't live polygamy. Now Verlin was excommunicated from the church because he did. The scriptures always consoled him. He especially loved this one. All things work together for the good of them that love God. Romans 8:28. Verlin simply followed his conscience by living plural marriage. The difficulty was in hiding it for so long, being so fearful of what others would think, say, and do. Now that the whole world knew what Verlin's conscience drove him to do, and all those who would condemn us for it already had their way with us, we were finally free to live in the relative open without fear of further reprisals. We could throw off the terrible hypocrisy that had so invalidated me, especially as Verlin's second wife. Now we could live the principle proudly, as God surely intended it to be lived. I prayed this was the good to which all things had been working. Religious devotion characterized Verlin throughout all of our trials. He always remained faithful to his beliefs, putting his God and the church doctrine ahead of his wives and children. Twice a day, he'd call us all together for family prayers, and we would gather around him as he read to us from the scriptures and the Journal of Discourses. He was dedicated to the original teachings of the early 19th century Mormon Church. He always made sure we knew that God came first and he had to do whatever God required of him. And that's how we're ending it. I don't know what he thought was going to happen when he brought her to that person. Like, they probably were already watching for him before he even got there to the appointment. How did they even make the appointment? I'm interested in that too. Y'all let me know what you thought of this chapter. Like the video as it helps me in the algorithm. Until next time.